Well, welcome to all of you. We're going to structure the debate in this way. We're going to be looking at the benefits, the risks, the possibilities of regulation, and also, perhaps for our audience, they may be interested to know some advice from you about how they should study or prepare for the future themselves to make the best use of artificial intelligence. So, if I may start with you, Osman Ghazi. Artificial intelligence seems to be very fresh, very new in the news, but actually scientists have been working on it for, since the 50s. But you feel that the need to talk about the risks and benefits is most pressing now. Why is that?
Can you hear me now? Okay. Thank you for the question. So, actually, neither the analysis of risks and benefits of AI or nor the term itself is new. The term was coined back in 1950s, but we are discussing this now intensively because recently the balance between risk and benefits have been changed, tilted, and also there is now increasing conflict of interest. And B, most interestingly, so that our current governance mechanisms may not actually be handling the risks. So before that, there was this control-based mechanism, there was this already well-established governance mechanisms, legislations, controls all over the place. So the risks and benefits of then AI systems were actually be balanced and governed by those systems. But quite recently, we've seen this shift because of the paradigm shift in the development of AI systems. Now we have this shortly and maybe sometimes predominantly autonomous systems creating risks, making decisions about ourselves, and we don't know how they make those decisions. We don't know whether we are being discriminated against, whether we are actually put in a less favorable position. We don't know how that happens, and our current mechanisms cannot handle that because we don't have the information, we don't have disclosure because of that complicated structure. So because of that increased autonomy, our current systems cannot handle, apparently. So we are now discussing whether we need a new legislative measure, new governance system, new risk management frameworks that can actually address those additional mechanisms. And also, this is now becoming an increasingly economical topic. It's because of, as just Minister mentioned, many people risk actually losing their jobs of this. Many creators, many sectors are being sort of significantly changed, and we don't know how that economic effect will actually result in what kind of situation we're in. So because of the increased, heightened nature of these effects and implications, now we are discussing, hey, maybe we need something else because our current system cannot actually manage. Maybe it may actually be too late if we keep waiting rather than actually try to interfere. Because of this new nature, new balance or new imbalance, we are now jumping in to discuss this heightened in a very heated way.
Professor Mark Koppelberg, you're a professor of philosophy of technology and looking at the ethics of AI. Well, first of all, do you want to just explain why it's necessary to have that discipline?
Yeah, I think it's important to think about the ethical implications of AI, not only in general and not only listening to the technical experts, but also to have a broader discussion in society about the risks and limitations of artificial intelligence. And there I think ethics can contribute to think about what is a good life with technology, what is a good society with technology. And there are many risks at the moment, such as misinformation, people talking only to others who have the same opinion, bias and so on. And I think to tackle these, we need sort of broad collaboration that goes beyond the technical and also includes people from ethics, people from legal, and also a broader societal discussion, like what kind of lives do we want to lead with technology, how do we want to shape technology also as a society.
Louise, we're starting with the benefits of artificial intelligence, and you actually help governments publish data in a safe and transparent way to help build trust with citizens. Why is that important?
So with the trust aspect is huge for citizens. So they need to know that the government is working on their behalf. They're there to represent the people, and therefore they need to show that transparency through the data that they publish. So within the UK, we would partner with the UK government in order to help them to publish open data sets, and by actually making that data available and educating people to be able to use that data and understand that data, you start to change behaviors and build up trust. So one of the initiatives in the UK at the moment with the new government there is that they want to build what they're calling a national data library. And this is where they're going to bring together data sets. And to the minister's speech earlier, to make that data available in order to enhance public awareness about what's happening within the UK, but also to innovate, so to create innovative products and services using that data for the common good. And I think that that's going to be a major step forward. There's always been an ambition to do that. The ambition seems to be quite real now, which is really good. So we're very happy to support on that.
And Adam, founder of Channel One, you have argued for quite some time that it's very important that developing nations observe the power of artificial intelligence and don't get left behind. They need to get moving as fast as possible and make sure they're not left behind, because it's such a powerful tool. Tell us about the possible impacts on society of artificial intelligence.
Yeah, of course. It's a good question. I'm based in the West, so I can give you a Western-facing answer, which is when we think about what forces shape our society, there's 4 main areas in the United States that do that. It is Washington, D.C., which is really oversight of citizenship and, of course, the defense industry. There's Silicon Valley, Hollywood, and
Wall Street.
Thank you, and Wall Street for finance. And if you think about every single one of those will be completely remade at their core. The value that they deliver to society, they're going through a complete reinvention. And it's one of the few times in history when there are other people that can have an effect, because the gatekeepers are changing over. So if you are in what we consider a developing nation, or honestly, with the world becoming unipolar to multipolar, there are various power centers that there's going to be a vacuum to fill. And I think if you're strategic outside of the West, you want to get there as fast as possible to look at the value and the values that these power centers were putting out into the world and try to figure out the right way and the fastest way to get there and establish yourself.
And Professor Pascal Fung, I think you all agree there are tremendous benefits to be had from artificial intelligence, but actually you would argue that it's important, the most pressing issue is to actually make sure all the models are more affordable, more available, and actually are better, more efficient.
So I have been working on artificial intelligence technology since the late 1980s, and I've seen different generations of development. And I remember in the 90s when we used to think of data that was used to train AI systems, and what we call big data was one book. So that was big data. And today, we've made tremendous progress via, first of all, deep learning about 10 years ago, and then today, these large foundational models. So we need to, today the challenge has somewhat shifted. I mean, in the past, when you're dealing with smaller models and smaller data size, and things were confined to the laboratories, today, before the models that's even ready, people are already using them in applications. So the cycle from core research to actual applications and in the hands of the end user is very, very short today. So the concern there today is that before we're ready, we're launching the models. Ready meaning what? Ready meaning that we have tested models with extensive, in extensive scenarios, because today it is impossible. These models are so big, they can be applying all kinds of scenarios. It has become impossible to test them exhaustively in all scenarios. So there's also this kind of user-involved development cycle, because where users use them in different scenarios, they provide the data back, and we have to retrain them, and so on. So this process has become gigantic. It's at a global scale. And on the other hand, because these models are so big, running them has become super expensive. So this is why I heard earlier the minister mention the divide between the haves and the AI haves and the AI have-nots. I think the most important factor contributing to that is the assets, the computing power, and the possession of this kind of large training data set. So for different stakeholders, for the Global South and other underrepresented groups to have the equal say and equal participation in this technological revolution, it is important that we realize that and that we make it possible to empower people like women, for example, young girls into STEM fields, for them to come in to have a contribution to this technology. Technology cannot be such an impactful technology cannot be solely developed by male engineers in the laboratory. It has to involve the whole society. And when you talk about democratization, it is important to democratize the usage of AI, of course, but it is even more important to democratize the development of such a consequential technology that's going to affect our future society and future generations. So it is important to bring different stakeholders and empower women and girls to come into STEM and to come into the core AI development and research.
Professor Osman-Ghazi, do you accept these are important points? And how would we make sure we democratize and make sure it's more evenly available to everybody?
That's a very, actually, difficult question, but I'm going to try to answer it from one perspective. So as far as we can tell now, well, all those advanced models are developed by a small group of actors, and actually there are now AI global powers and non-AI powers. So I think we have to try to actually narrow the gap between those things. And currently, all those legislative attempts, the one in the EU, the one happening at the OECD, the one happening with the Turkey's involvement as well at the Council of Europe, is trying to do that, but trying to do that in a way that is better, that is making AI better for everyone. When we talk about better, accessible, responsible AI, actually we should be also talking about the actor. So if there is a very efficient AI system undertaking a task that was requiring, I don't know, 100 people's work, then is that system better for those people who are going to lose their job? Or if there is the AI system that is commercializing a product much better than it's used to by processing personal data of the clients, of the users, then is that system also better for those clients and users? So there must be this understanding of holistic and responsible AI governance schemes in which we are trying to bring as much stakeholders as possible, as many stakeholders as possible, but also trying to introduce and implement different perspectives, because having an efficient AI may not actually be something that we want. I don't know, I don't want AI systems to actually mimic my dead relatives. I don't want to see that kind of stuff. I don't want to be tricked by an AI system, but I really want to actually see AI being used for good. So this is a discussion that will go on, but we have to start now before we are actually see this increased adoption rates. ChatGPT was probably had the highest adoption rate in the history, and we're going to probably see that record getting broken again. In near future. So we don't want this adoption rate and this hype to get over and leave responsible and better users of AI behind. This is why actually linking this to your first question. This is why we now decided to intervene to see that AI is being developed in a manner that is good for everyone, that is responsible for everyone, I think.
Can I just throw in something from Elon Musk? You may have heard of him. He says there's a civilizational risk. Professor Koppelberg, can I ask you, is that hyperbole or is there something to that?
I think currently there's a lot of emphasis in California about these risks in the long term, and there's a lot of doom thinking about AI. And I think the problem with that is that whatever might be true about it or not, it really distracts from the kind of discussions we should have now about the problems we have now and in the near future with AI. So I think we should really focus on that responsible development of AI. And the reason why this is important is that the usual thing with technology in the most of human history is that we innovate and we bring things on the market and we already use things, and then there are problems, there are accidents. And so what usually happens is that then the ethics people and the regulation people sort of are allowed still to clean up the dead bodies. But what we really need is the seatbelts. We need also to really inject ethics into the development of the technology. And my impression is that more and more technical people are open to that. But we have the barriers of, for example, the big tech companies who have indeed gained a lot of power, as the minister said. And I think there we need also some solutions to deal with those power imbalances.
Louise, I don't know if you agree with Elon Musk that it's a civilizational risk, but there are risks, of course, and that's what we're now moving into. Where would you help the governments to mitigate risks?
Yeah, so, part of our work globally and within the UK is to create sort of ethical frameworks and tools and training to make people aware that are working with these systems of the ethical considerations, as my colleague has mentioned, and also the positivity that can come from AI. But the big thing that we look at very specifically is actually, is the data AI ready? So you can have a lot of bad data filling AI, which gives you very bad results, because there's not enough diversity. The quality of the data is not enough. And so therefore it's really important to make sure that the data that is feeding the AI is AI ready. So I think that's something that when I go to conferences, what I hear from big tech is it's all about the output. There's nothing about the input. And if the quality of the input is not good, the quality of the output is going to be bad. And I think that we need to pay more attention to the food stock that's actually going in to AI. And I think putting some decision-making back into the hands of us as individuals is also really important, because right now there's a big sort of scrape going on of personal data that we would have shared out there through Facebook or Instagram or the various platforms we're on. So one of the protocols that we're sort of stewarding or looking after at the Open Data Institute, created by Tim Berners-Lee, is a protocol called SOLID. And SOLID is where it is giving you user-centric responsibility over your data, and you decide who you want to share that data with. Not everybody else is deciding, but you decide. But I think there's a big education piece, and maybe it'll change the course direction of the web in the future.
Adam, one of the risks that you've identified is the personalization of news, which the minister did refer to, the creating of echo chambers where people are constantly informed by those who reaffirm and confirm their own biases. Why is that dangerous?
So I think we have to take a half step back and understand the level of personalization that we're expecting to see. We're building part of it, so we know. And at one level, today, you select what news network you want to watch. And in some parts of the world, you know exactly what you're going to get when you put that channel on. If you compare that to an entertainment product, a streaming service, when you turn that on, they may have a catalog of 40 or 50,000 different shows and movies, and they'll pick a few hundred and they'll show that to you. So the first level of thinking is you might have news that operates that way, where you turn on the news and it shows you the categories that maybe you want to see. But we've pushed that so much farther to the level where you can think about how interested you might be in a particular story, and then pushed it even further, thinking, well, what is your level of expertise in that subject matter? So in the future, if things go the way I think it will, when you consume news, it's news that you want, have some interest in, and in the right format for you, whether it's text or audio or video, but engaging you at the depth of interest and level of expertise that you have. So when it comes to the issue of an echo chamber, if done poorly, this could be a disaster. But I think that there are companies, and we hope to be one of those, that are operating in good faith and feel that there is some societal responsibility that we have to present both sides of an argument. And in fact, I would say that with the technology we've developed, we can do a more effective job than traditional cable news. Usually there's a lot of he said or she said or mudslinging across the aisle, different political parties having at each other. But if you can essentially boil the information down and highlight the issues that one party or another might care about and surface that, you can really do two things. You can give people news that they feel is for them, but you can also expose them to multiple opinions and different ideas. But ultimately, it is a risk, and it will be up to the news provider to act responsibly.
I think we can move on to perhaps regulation now, Professor Koppelberg. There is resistance to regulation, as there is in every industry, and yet at the same time we have some of the industry leaders, like Sam Altman, coming forward and scaring everybody, and then saying, no, regulation is needed now. Who are we to believe?
Yeah, I think with regulation, there's a lot of resistance, but in the end, I think we need some kind of platform, some kind of basis for then companies to do their thing and do their creative and innovative work. And also at the level of countries, I think a country can choose to just invest in AI and that's it, but a country can also choose to take a role of ethical leader and influence also other countries on the world stage to combine ethics and innovation in smart ways. So I think there are lots of opportunities there, both politically and ethically.
Yeah, and Professor Osman Ghazi?
Can I? Oh,
Yeah.
Okay. I was going to ask whether I could jump in. So, I think when we talk about governments' attempts to actually regulate this area, take some actions, or about resistance, we should be also aware one thing, which is closely related to Turkey, but for other states as well. Political area is, well, definitely shaped with the interests, and when we talk about legislation, when we talk about actually cross-border and influencing legislation, not all those legislations are tailor-made for all jurisdictions, all states, all countries' needs. So when we talk about governance mechanisms, laws, regulations, and resisting, we should be also taking into account the development gap between those countries and these AI benefits. Because the trend with the technology regulation is that when you start developing a technology and when there is no legislation, when there's no regulation in place, strict regulation in place, of course there are practical ones, but when there is no strict legislation in place, the first movers have these advantage and they just develop. And at some point, if actually you create rules, taking those into account, shaping around them, then you create this regulatory capture framework that will actually prevent new actors from being emerged, or a specific sector not being able to develop in a certain country or certain jurisdiction. That happened in many previous technologies. That may also happen here as well. So when we talk about the EU AI Act, supposedly the most prominent binding legislation, we also have this Council of Europe Convention. You can see that the focus is actually on those developed models, but there are many other small, actually developers, small enterprises that will be affected by those legislations, those strict requirements, that may actually lead them to a worse situation that may happen, that they have been in before. So when we talk about governance mechanisms, implementations, measures, we should be taking into account that gap and not trying to introduce every strict newly emerged restriction legislation to all actors, because that may lead us to a worse situation that we have been in before. That's something we usually just overlook and focus on main actors. We talk about large language models, we talk about big developers, and we talk about legislative provisions as if it's all restricted to them, but there are small actors that needs more fields, and there are provisions, yes, but when you when you experience only the practical side of one end, you actually overlook some small aspects. So every measure, every legislation, every governance mechanism should be tailor-made in the sense that needs of the country, or in the sense of the needs of the sector, for example. You cannot treat financial sector and the medical sector as same because of risks, because of the development differences as well. I just wanted to say this.
And Professor Fung, you're slightly contrarian on regulation. You don't actually think it's the most pressing issue.
I think regulations are, of course, important to protect the society from harm. But I think there are ample regulations in many sectors. For example, in the health sector, in the financial sector, in the Geneva Convention that governs the use of weaponry and so on. So those regulations are there to be respected, and there's also privacy, security regulations and so on, data security and so on. And every technology, whether it's AI, whether it's some other technology, need to be made compliant with these regulations. This is not a debate, I think. Now, on the other hand, I think we are focusing a lot of our energy in talking about regulating today's AI without paying enough attention how to enable today's AI to do good in the hands of many. So to me, the most important thing today is actually to make these foundational models open. So open source the foundational models so that people from all kinds of nations, researchers in academia as well as in the industry, they can perform their research on these foundational models at the source. They can also carry out research on the safeguarding, safety measures of these models, again, directly on the source, being able to access the weights and so on. So it is important to make all these models open source. So there are bigger models, such as the LLMs, but there are also other types of foundational models. Models that are built for programming, for example, code generation, for music generation, and for audio generation, and so on. Today, there are few industry players, such as Meta, Fair, and also Hugging Face. There are few players that are putting their code out there. In fact, different countries are using the Llama open source code to develop into their own version, their own languages. I think that is very important to keep AI science open, because today's AI progress was made possible by the open science community from decades of work. It was not proprietary. If it had been proprietary, it had been closed source, we would never be at this stage today. So it's important to continue to open source what we do and to enable people to do research directly on these open source. So I think that is more pressing than, let's say, coming up with new regulations on the AI technology development itself. I think if you want to regulate AI, maybe in terms of governance, you should mandate that these important technologies be open source.
Mm-hmm. Would anyone like to respond to Professor Fung? Yes?
So just to clarify one thing, none of those regulations currently trying to govern this field is saying, hey, you should be prohibiting all AI systems blanket and period. It's not the case. There are some cases that have been seen strictly, dangerous, maybe risky. So they will probably over time be prohibited. But the actual idea is, yes, we want this to be used and we are aware of the risks. But we want actually these models, these systems to go through security checks, assessments, maybe some open source initiatives, maybe some data checks, and then we will allow them to be used because we know the benefits, but we also know the risks. So we are trying to balance these two. So it's not ideal, it's not practical actually to say, hey, let's ban this. You cannot actually stop people from using those large language models at this point because we are getting used to that. We are getting used to them in every aspect. The thing is, we should be learning them, learning how to use them responsibly again. I mean, there is this AI literacy provisions and requirements and notifications all over the place. We seem like to be focusing on regulation, but AI literacy is also part of like legislation. And just because it's not on the headlines, it doesn't mean that those regulations are trying to actually increase the awareness and trying to get this balance. So it's not about prohibition or restriction only. It's about a balance, just like it's always been. How successful they will be, we're going to see only over time.
Professor Kokkelberg, do you think there is sufficient regulation in place, or does it need to actually seriously catch up with the developments in the technology?
Yeah, I think we see that these technologies, especially AI in the form of generative AI, that developments are going very fast. And so we do need to catch up. And the problem is, like with the regulations such as the EU AI Act, is that it's very good at the point when it's made, but then quickly some changes had to be made. And I think we need some mechanisms in our policy making and our decision making as democratic societies to make sure that we can respond in a faster way and in a way that at the same time gets in expertise but also is legitimate, is sort of supported also by people. And so I think to do that we need probably to think about, okay, what is the future of our democracies, the future of the political systems we have in the light of these rapid and drastic technological changes. So I argue, for example, in my book, Why AI Undermines Democracy, that we need new institution that links really expertise with those legitimate bodies like parliaments in order to react in a more permanent way instead of now ad hoc having always some advisory councils, but really have something more permanent and more proactive built into our democracies.
As we heard at the beginning, the minister said that potentially old jobs will die and new jobs will replace Adam. We're in the last few minutes of this conversation. Just for the younger people and somebody who wants to retrain, what should they be looking to study and how should they retrain to take advantage of the new era? Big question. Adam, yes.
Look, I think the industry is changing so quickly that the first thing you can do is to stay on top of it. And every time a new tool comes out, you should try it. And really push what it can do, invent new things that you can do with it. Because I can tell you, I promise you, the people that are making these don't know the true power of it. You train a model, you let it loose, you red team it, you try it out internally, but a lot of the most interesting use cases happen outside of the office with the users. And there's nothing stopping you from being one of the premier users of various sets. And it's been mentioned, generative technology, whether it's image-based or music-based, or it could be in the media, it could be in academia. There's a lot that you can do to take the existing technology and push it forward in your own lives. So I would start there.
And Louise, same question?
Sorry, I would say that I think a lot of the AI now is actually doing the coding for you. So years ago, people used to say, be a coder. But that's not so much the case now. I think that people understanding societies and ethics and different cultures, I think that's a really, really important part of how we move forward with AI. And I don't think it should be underestimated.
Professor Kokkelberg? In terms of staying on top of it, retraining, keeping yourself relevant in a new era?
Yeah, I think in the end it requires that we really need also some coupling between the places where there is the actual development of the technology and, on the other hand, the ethics and the policy. So we need some regulation that's not necessarily always only about forbidding certain things or limiting certain things, but rather constructively tries to get the ethics already in at a phase of development. For example, I co-founded Daiki, which is working on that, supporting companies to do that. So I think we need to think about these kind of proactive mechanisms and also have a framework for that to support it at the societal level.
Yeah. Professor Gujlaturk, how do kids these days choose the course, choose the career that doesn't get overtaken and made, dispensable by AI?
So I'm a legal academic and I'm a legal professional myself, and I think my sector is very vulnerable against these things because LLMs are creating a very high quality written material. That seems like it. I am skeptic on how much reasoning they can do, but that's certainly dangerous for junior, for example, at the entry level. What I can say is that I think not all professions will actually get destroyed or will pull to non-existence. It will be like actually transformation. We'll need more AI literate lawyers, and we'll need more of that change, because all new technology is actually bringing their own intermediate levels. So when we talk about, for example, crypto assets and bitcoins, they were actually introduced to abolish current financial regime, but they came up with their own intermediaries instead. That's what's going to happen with AI. The thing is, we have to be careful against this being too quick so that there will not be this societal disruption, because there are studies, especially in the US, showing that people whose jobs are highly exposed, highly vulnerable against AI tend to be of a certain political arrangement. So if you actually create that disruption, that may lead to the disruption of the current political discourse, and they may lead to the government. And if this is going through that kind of reactive the moment, you can see actually a reactive and not very reasonable offensive actions against technology itself too. So I think the transformation is inevitable, but we need to conduct it as if it's an improvement and transitional one, rather than letting it to disrupt. So, and that can only happen by increasing the awareness, giving more space to people who are exposed to AI technology to find themselves a new position, maybe a transformation into a new job, maybe a new enhancement or something like that, I think.
And final word to you, Professor Fung. Young people choosing a career path, something to study. Older people perhaps retraining if their jobs have become obsolete. What's the best way to do that? How do you pick a job that's not going to be made obsolete? It seems like AI can do anything, or it will be able to.
So I'm engineering professor, right? But I think our universities need to change our curriculum. So I have a very radical proposal, which is for the universities to go back to where we were 500 years ago, meaning that we teach the fundamentals, we teach mathematics, we teach the sciences, and we teach humanities, history, philosophy, ethics, and literature, of course. We teach the very fundamentals of our humanities, collective wisdom, and not skills. Because even 10 years ago when people were saying, oh, we should make the girls code, and I already told them, I have 2 daughters, coding will come and coding will be replaced. So instead of wasting time learning coding, you spend time learning mathematics and physics and in fundamental sciences. Why? Because we want to train people to have creative thinking, and not to forget the arts as well. To have creative thinking, to have critical thinking. Those are the most important skills, if I want to talk about skills in a human being, so that they can make their own judgment in the future, no matter what technology trend comes, and no matter how politics changes, no matter how things change in the world, they can make the correct judgment for themselves, for their families, for their society, and contribute to the democratic development of our society. So I think it's very important to go back to the fundamentals and for people to learn the fundamental humanities and the sciences.
Great advice. Thank you very much, Professor Fung. Much appreciated. Appreciate it. Thank you. And thank you to all of our panel, and thank you all very much for listening. You'll be glad to hear it's now time for lunch, so Afiyet olsun.